Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar on how to prepare your team for the future workplace. I'm Joseph Katz, run marketing for Kettle, and be your host and moderator today. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes, give people a chance to get settled. During that time, I'm going to throw up a poll. I'll leave it there until we get some answers. So answer, or it's going to stay there. No, just kidding. So here you go. Just help everyone understand who you are and what the state of the world is. And thank you all for joining us. I see some people already responding. Excellent. So we're going to keep this up for another minute, and then I'll get started with some opening remarks and thank yous. And we will jump into the webinar. Panel, how's everyone doing?
Doing good.
Good, Joseph. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. That awkward silence always gets people, right? All right. So another 10 seconds and we will go. And if you don't think I'm timing it, I actually have a little timer here. So
complete faith in your structure today.
All right. So that is the results are now being shared. Everyone can hopefully see them. I'll leave that there for a second.
Wow. Very interesting.
All right. Glad you guys are enjoying that. All right. So let's get into this. So if anyone has questions, please drop them into the Q&A box and we'll try to get to them as soon as possible. I'm going to start with some quick introductions. And I just want to let everyone know that this is the first in a series of webinars on future of work. And we're going to send out an email after this event with details on the future events, which will be held in early and I guess throughout the month of January. So before we get into the real nitty gritty, I want to thank the entire panel for their time putting this together with us and for all of our viewers for joining us today. I'm going to give each of the panelists a couple of minutes of recognition here, but I've shortened all your bios, but I'm going to give you a minute or two after we start to expand on your background, talk about your companies, and give everyone a little bit better sense of who you are. So real quickly, Christine has over 18 years of dynamic experience in HR and consulting. She's a founding pioneer on the PuzzleHR team and is helping clients navigate through this rapidly changing employer and employee environment. Noah is the president and CEO of Ripple Analytics, and he's drawing on 2 decades of experience establishing and building law firms in New York City. Noah has witnessed firsthand the destructive and wholly ineffective nature of annual reviews. Ripple disrupts the traditional approach to evaluating talent and empowers organizations to build stronger and more efficient culture-driven teams. Tony is a recovering CPA. He utilizes the knowledge he gathered as a CPA and CFO to be a useful tool for business owners. Tony has appeared on Fox Business News, Good Day New York, and he has been featured in the New York Times and Crain's New York. Brian Gorman is the International Coach Federation Certified Professional Coach and Change Management Guru. He's a former member of the Forbes Coaches Council and a frequent contributor to Forbes Online and a TEDx speaker. And then Nick is a serial founder and entrepreneur, has a track record of building successful ventures across a wide range of industries. He's currently the CEO and co-founder of Kettle, a company enabling smart hybrid work solutions and with software workplace expertise. So that was a quick intro for everyone. Christine, you want to kick us off with a little bit more of your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Joseph, and thanks to all the other panelists and attendees today. Excited to talk about this very important topic with everyone. Here at Puzzle, we are really trying to help business owners determine what is the best solution for moving forward with their organizations, whether it's hybrid, whether it's a flexible work environment, or whether it's an industry where you need to be in the office or in the shop in order to conduct daily activities. So really what we hope to bring from a puzzle perspective is giving you some tips and tricks on how to keep your employees engaged during this time, how to make your managers leaders at this time. I think that's one of the key components of what we're seeing is there's a shift within how employees are managed and how leaders are leading teams, and really how to create that culture, right? We're hearing from all people within all different spectrums of all the generations, I should say, within the work environment today. So we're really trying to help bridge some of those gaps and keep employees engaged and keep company culture alive during this change, right? And been partnering with Tony and Brian on that change management style as well. So really just trying to help leaders in the organization figure out how to manage, engage, and create culture during this tumultuous time.
Excellent. Tony, how about a quick intro?
Okay. We are the Doobie Associates, what you need to do in business to be successful and who you need to be. I'm the first half of the equation. I focus on the doing. As a recovering CPA, I focus on the structure, the processes, the procedures to make those numbers look better, because nothing excites me more than seeing the numbers look better for my clients. We are leading the 4-day charge across America. We got turned on to the 4-day work week about 3 years ago. We trademarked it, and now we joined forces with the group who is leading the crusade across the world, starting in New Zealand, a little bit more on that later, bringing the 4 days into recognition that it might be a better way to go for a lot of businesses. And that brought us to the flexible workplace.
Excellent. And the second half of the Doobie Associates, Brian?
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, panelists. That's right. I'm half a doobie. I am an executive coach. My background is in organizational change management, and for many years I worked with both local small businesses all the way up to global Fortune 100 companies as they undertook transformation. I was on the Merck transformation team when they did their global transformation in the early 2000s. And now working with Tony, working with business leaders as they figure out how to transform and succeed in this highly disrupted, not only work environment, but highly disrupted employer-employee power dynamic.
Excellent. And Noah?
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, fellow panelists, and thank everyone that took some time to listen to some ideas from a bunch of dynamic professionals that have opinions on a lot of things, but more specifically on how to make the future workplace better, stronger, more efficient, more productive. I am a recovering lawyer. Tony's a recovering CPA. I practiced law for a long time and managed people for a long time and realized what's good and bad. And there's a lot more bad, unfortunately, than good. The old adage, people quit their managers, not their jobs. I know that firsthand. We had managers that were horrible. And a lot of that reason is because they were promoted because they were there the longest and they weren't really managers. What we did when we founded Ripple was we wanted to create a platform to gather, crunch, and deliver data, objective information about how people are working together. Are they positive influences on each other, poor influences? Your ripple effect score is your net impact on your organization. We're helping managers and owners make more objective decisions, which will grow culture, and the ROI of the day is increase those retention rates. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to sharing some ideas.
Excellent. And Nick, why don't you round out the panel?
Sure. Thanks, everybody. And hello, I'm Nick. I guess I'm a recovering founder if we're in the theme of recovery. Our business pre-COVID was basically completely different than it is now, but we have pivoted our business and we've effectively spoken to approaching 2,000 business leaders in different positions across different orgs, trying to figure out hybrid. And we've done our best to listen and try to build software that helps with empathy, kind of all of you that are tasked with figuring out these new complexities and putting the puzzle back together.
Excellent. All right, so let's kick things off. We named this event How to Prepare Your Teams for the Future Workplace. So I want to ask a big picture question, and Noah, I want to see if you can address it first. how can owners, executives implement effective change within the modern workplace when their different generational workforces can't agree on much, if in fact anything?
Right. So it's a problem that's plagued ownership for probably centuries, certainly the last 60 years, is the old school versus the new school, and getting comfortable with the fact that you have to listen as owners, executives, managers. You have to listen to the junior people within your organization. You don't have to follow blindly and do everything that they're asking you to do, but certainly what you have to do is appreciate that they're sharing concerns, information with you, and pivot on that information. If it looks like maybe it's a different way of doing things instead of a wrong way of doing things, try it out, see what happens. The other key component to the generational workforce gap, I think, is certainly appreciation for technology. You know, I think the older owners, executives, they love the fact that their employees are available 24/7, but they then shudder at the fact that maybe a flexible work schedule can't work. You know, it can, as long as you appreciate the importance and power, really, of technology.
Excellent. Nick, I know we at Kettle did some Gen Z research a couple months back, and I know you have some thoughts on this topic, so floor is yours.
Yeah, so I mean, I think looking at the generational differences is a key component of I think Brian said kind of the power dynamics have been broken and they need to be reassembled and create new sort of equilibriums between employees and employers. Some interesting stats for those of you, we commissioned a study of 1,000 Gen Z job seekers, and just kind of the highlight reel, 65% said that they wanted a hybrid workplace when evaluating a new employment option, and they considered it one of the most important factors. 70% said they would select an employer who offered hybrid over one that didn't. Almost half of the Gen Zers said that if their employer mandated a return to the office 5 days a week, they would look for another job. And 2/3 said that they felt that hybrid benefited health and wellness. And I guess the last stat is about 50% felt that employers aren't really ready to implement this. So kind of taking on that in context with what Noah said, it's not one generation over the other, but some form of compromise and meeting in the middle, I think is going to be where this has to settle ultimately.
Brian, right before we started this webinar, you mentioned you had done some research on a similar topic. I don't know if you have it handy.
I do, and it's not my research. It's actually Gallup's research on the millennial generation, and they did this a few years ago on how millennials want to work and live. And the messaging is really clear: from my paycheck to my purpose, from my satisfaction to my development, from my boss to my coach, from my annual review to my ongoing conversations, from my weaknesses to my strengths, and from my job to my life. Those are all cultural shifts that millennials are looking for in their organizations. What Tony and I have seen coming out of the whole impact of COVID is that we're now hearing that not just from millennials.
Thanks for sharing that. You know, we have a lot of different generational data points that were just shared, and we have a question from one of our attendees, Adam, who asked the question. And Christine, I'm going to throw this question to you. How will companies manage younger, newer employees entering into this, I'm going to use the word hybrid right now, hybrid work model? What will happen to mentorship opportunities if some of the senior executives are all remote?
Great. Thank you, Joseph. I think this goes to making sure that employers have established an extremely well thought out, not only onboarding process for employees, but as well as orientation process for employees. You can absolutely still mentor and lead new employees and teach them through a virtual environment. And we're seeing that more and more and more. For example, here at PuzzleHR, we have one corporate headquarters, which is down in Tampa, but the majority of the employees are all remote. So I think it's imperative that as you're developing these relationships with these new employees, that managers who would typically bring an employee or a new employee on a meeting or walk them through a new process still do that. But we just have to be a little bit more structured than what we were in the past. And it can't be, I'm just going to go grab, Susan today to walk into this meeting with me. So ensuring that the first 90 days are well thought out from a leadership and mentorship perspective is extremely important. We're also finding, if you're on a growth spurt, that peer groups with each other tend to be really helpful. So if you can bring on a few new employees at the same time, having them be resources for each other is also extremely important. Open door policies and communications with managers, also making sure that employees know that they can reach out to their manager. Set up a chat channel, right, for your new employees and management team. Make sure that there's on-demand feedback available through things like Slack or Teams or Zoom chat, whatever the technology is that you have. I also think it's extremely important to make sure that we're monitoring the success of the employees during the first 90 days. Ask them how they're feeling. We go back to that employee engagement. Making sure that those employees are feeling connected to their work environment is extremely important. Making sure that they feel that they have the right resources to be successful in their new environment is extremely important. So the manager should really be still hand-holding those new employees on a day-to-day basis. And then perhaps maybe a peer or someone from HR should do a wellness check-in with that employee as well. So we absolutely can still help and train and get people acclimated to the new environment. It's just a little bit more structured today. And we have to plan for it. And we just have to be on Zoom when we need to be on Zoom. So I think that's a really critical piece that a lot of businesses kind of flew by their seats, is the onboarding and orientation period, which now needs to be really tight in order to be effective with training new employees.
My guess is a lot of these companies had the structure, they just didn't force the structure. Now, what I'm hearing you say is you need that structure, and you need to follow the structure. On a personal level, it's been a while since I had a formal onboarding in the company, but I do remember one organization where I worked where we had a buddy. You were partnering with, someone else in the organization, not in your department, that you kind of check in on with you every 60 days or something like that. So those obviously all help. Appreciate the thoughtful answer. Tony, I want to clear the air here. I used the phrase hybrid before. As we were all preparing for this, we all joked a little bit about different terminology: hybrid, flexible, remote, 4-day work weeks. What are the differences? Why don't you clear the air, define some of these things for us, and how should they be used, if at all?
Well, I think the perception most business owners should take when they first deal with this is there is no black and white. They should get over, don't worry about the fear of being totally remote. Don't have a fear of what is hybrid, how are we going to juggle that? And I think, they really have to recognize the challenges where, employees have voiced, their voices say, we don't want to commute as much as we used to. Well, one of the advantages to the employer is you could downsize the size of your business. So if they're working from home, there's an advantage to it. And I know Nick can talk about this a little bit later, but some people don't want to work from home. They also don't want to go to the office every day either. And that's something where remote takes a different meaning than working from home. And this, now we're getting to the whole flexibility feeling of this. Each one of these comes with its advantages, its disadvantages and challenges, and we really can't touch on all of those today. But now when you talk about hybrid, that's a challenge for managers to really be able to, if we're going to downsize the size of our office, well, how are we going to get people in and out? Then when we get to flexibility in the 4-day, and flexibility is really the word that we like to use, because the Crusaders, the very first people who introduced 4 days to the world, Perpetual Guardian in New Zealand, they started with a 4-day work week. Once they trialed it, they brought it into being in 2018 and 19. Now it's become a flexible workplace because the employees have different needs. And the big question, in order to define what's going to work for your company, is take the question down to your employees. What will work for them in order to service your clients the best? At Perpetual Guardian, where they brought in a flexible work environment, their sales have gone up since they've done it. Their profits have gone up. Their employee engagement has gone up. We've worked with another company called Uncharted, and where Perpetual Guardian was a financial services firm, and they needed a little bit more availability. Uncharted is a much more project management business. They're helping businesses get started, and they're on a strict 4-day work week. What's going to work for you is not going to work for somebody else. And that's where the flexibility comes into this whole concept of what we're trying to talk about today.
So it's less about defining the terms, more about applying it to the business, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Nick, I know,
What fits?
Nick, I know you've spoken to lots of companies. We talk about it internally. But what do these terms mean to you, and how do you think about these terms?
Well, I think the construct of 9 to 5, born from the Industrial Revolution, is shattered for most at this point. According to McKinsey, 90% of companies will be hybrid. I define hybrid as anything other than 9 to 5. So whatever that shape that's going to take for folks, and to Tony's point, I think you take it down to the extent possible, as much as you can, take it down to the employee level for that engagement and the right sizing. Kind of every group, every individual is different, but when you do start to peel back the onion layers of hybrid, you realize there are some real complexity there. What's a rule? What's choice? Who makes it? Is it the individual, the team, the org, the C-suite? And then how do you communicate that? And I think that's really where we've spent a lot of time trying to help leaders get grounded and get clear wayfinding paths to operationalizing some of these new complexities. And from where we sit, we think return to office / hybrid or flexible V1 is really the starting line. And the key to it is going to be gathering data, feedback, insights to right size it and optimize kind of into the future.
I don't remember who said it earlier, but someone said about listening to the employees. You know, that's sort of the key here. So basic, right? I joke with one of my coworkers. We have 2 ears, 1 mouth. You just have to use them in proportion. I'm going to throw out another poll because my next question is going to touch on this topic. So if everyone could take a second to answer this question about employee challenges, that'd be helpful to the panel as well as this ongoing conversation. And while that's being answered, Christine, I got a kind of a 2-part question here for you. And so let me just bring it up. What advice do you have for the best way to bring your team back together so everyone feels safe, both physically and mentally? And how do you retain your best employees? You know, it's, you know, all this stuff going on now.
Yeah, and those are 2 very loaded questions. You know, I think from a safety perspective, it's really making sure that you have a thought out safety plan in place, right, for your employees. We don't know who or what has been impacted or will continue to be impacted by this pandemic. So the more that you can communicate to your employees what safety protocols you're taking into consideration, the better, right? So we look at, you know, technology like Kettle has to ensure that either people are vaccinated, have their boosters, and or have a negative test without violating anybody's personal space to be able to do so. I think a lot of employers have been nervous to document safety policies. And not only is it for physical safety, but again, it's for psychological safety as well, because we do not know the impacts that everybody has from this pandemic. And it's making sure that people practice, we've said it a few times, empathy, right? Again, we don't know what everybody's burden is that they're bearing during this, right? They could be, you know, working from home and have had 3 kids to juggle, right? While homeschooling, they could have lost a family member. It could be somebody who is experiencing social isolation. So we really need to practice empathy in this environment as well, if we're talking about psychological safety and helping your employees understand what that truly means. So, you know, I think that those from a safety perspective are some of the highlights of what employers can start to do to make people feel safe physically and psychologically. When we look at retaining your top talent, that is a loaded question today. I'm going to go back to, again, a lot of the words that we talked about. It's employee engagement, right? It is that feeling that the employees are being heard. And again, you made a point, Joseph, we don't have to follow blindly the employees, right? And you're still the business owner, you're still the decision maker, you're still the visionary. You know, you still put everything on the line to start this organization, but we really do need to listen to our employees, and that could be done via several different ways. It could be the type of reviews that Noah and his team provides, right? It could be some better leadership training and development that both Puzzle and the Doobie brothers can do for the organization. I think that's the key, is we're hearing that employees want to be heard in this environment. They want to be paid fairly and compensated fairly for the quality of work that they're doing. They want their peers to be held accountable. And they want to have that flexibility to, to work on a project, again, where you can, right? We all have deadlines in business, but if they want to go to their kids' soccer game, they could go to their kids' soccer game. They don't have to exhaust PTO to go to the doctor's appointment, right? So creating this flexible environment allows them to feel heard, allows them to have their personal life. And guess what? A lot of people are working in the nighttime and early morning when they were commuting or, potentially watching a movie because they took that time and you allowed for that flexibility. So I think we go back to employee, hearing your employees, listening to your employees, practicing empathy. And at the end of the day, this will help create that reward within your organization to retain your employees. We'll go into a little bit more about this in some of our other seminars, but I think those are some of the key components to retention these days.
Joseph, if I can add one thing to what Christine said,
Sure.
I'd like to ask those who are attending or who are watching the video, what gets you up and to the office, whatever that means, in the morning? You know what that is. Now, the next question is, what gets those people who report to you up and to the office in the morning? Most of the time when Tony and I ask that question, we get a shrug, we get a, I don't know. If you find that out, I had one client just 2 days ago who came back after asking that question. He said, I took one of my best employees and put him in the worst possible job with the promotion I gave him because I didn't know what really drives his passion. If you can align your needs with your employees' passions, you don't have to worry about engagement. You don't have to worry about retention. They take care of themselves.
That's an excellent point. I think there's a trust element here too. Trust your employees. You listen to them. You hire the right people. They're going to want to stay with you. They're going to want to do the good work.
Trust. I'm sorry, Joseph.
No, that's just what this is for.
Trust is fundamental to everything we're talking about. Because if your employees don't trust you, if you don't trust your employees, they're not going to tell you. They're not going to give you the honest answers to the questions that you ask.
Yeah, they're going to tell you what you want to hear or what they think you want to hear. So I want to keep building on this engagement theme because we had some pre-questions on this topic. Tanya asked, and this is like two people asked similar questions. How do I keep my staff engaged while teleworking? And Noah, if you want to answer this question, if you can also include maybe some specific ideas from Mano who had a very similar question but was looking for ideas.
Sure. Thanks. At Ripple, we're all about feedback. Feedback and engagement are synonymous, right? The importance of feedback can't be understated because it drives engagement. Engaged employees are more productive. They're better employees to work with, so you have higher retention. But when you talk about implementing a solution to gather feedback to drive engagement, it can be organizationally driven in terms of if your people are single person home offices in 50 states. It's a lot more difficult than if you have 10 people in an office that see each other every day, because there's the natural engagement that occurs when you see somebody down the hall. But the most important thing is it's not the most important thing. One of the most important things is gathering that feedback, getting objective information that you can make decisions on. The second most important thing is actually using the feedback to make those objective decisions on. We had a client years ago that we gathered feedback for 2 years and the owner didn't like it. And he goes, your algorithm must be wrong. And I'm like, no, my algorithm's not wrong. Your second in command is not liked by anybody in your company. And there was this defense mechanism. And I told the owner, I'm like, listen, Ripple isn't for everybody. Honest feedback isn't for everybody. You got to be able to take it on the chin sometimes. But if everyone hates this person that you put in power and you're not doing anything about it, then that's a horrible reflection on your leadership capabilities. So gather the feedback, use the feedback, and shameless plug, Ripple can help you do that.
Not shameless, that's why you're here. So Brian and Tony, I want to keep going on this engagement for another second or two. How can companies create employee engagement that strengthen cultures for their teams, in this new working model, where some people are in the office, some people may not be. You may have people all over the world. What ideas do you have to share there?
Ryan, you want to start that off? You're muted.
We worked with a client not too long ago that was established 20 years ago, and for most of its life has been an international virtual organization. The first thing to do is hire people who believe in why you're here. Hire people who believe in what you believed in when you founded your business, if you're the founder. We've said it over and over and over again. You need to ask questions and you need to listen to the answers. Your employees are telling you. One of the most important lessons in change management is resistance is the other side of commitment. If you can listen to why people are resisting the change, why people are resisting coming back to the office, or why people are resisting 100% work from home, if you can hear that, that's information. And if you can respond to that information in a way that is respectful of the employees, you're helping to build commitment. The most important source of messaging, and I saw some information or some chat about communications, the most important source of messaging during times of disruption is from the immediate supervisor. So in response to the question about the CEO who laid off 900 people by Zoom, that ain't the way to do it, folks. And the people who were
Flawed model is an understatement.
and the people who were not laid off
Mm.
heard a very important message about their security and how much they're respected in that company as well.
And Brian, if I just want to add something to that.
Yeah.
So,
Uh,
okay, go ahead, finish with your thought, but
Yeah,
I saw something in the poll I want to bring out.
the last thing I want to say about this is, where does culture live? Culture is how people show up at work, how they make decisions, what they do, and how they do it. Your culture is inside your employees. And if you don't have the culture that you want, and you're in a position of leadership, you need to look at yourself and how you're role modeling for those who report to you.
And just right off the poll, I noticed that many of the concerns was very low about management. And if you're going to change the environment in your business, and you're going to want to retain people, keep them connected, and engagement, just want to re-ask the question. Don't you think that's the role of management, to take charge of that and use the new tools that are out there, like the Ripples and Kettle space, and also learn new methods? There's a word out there in the internet called enlightened management. How many of your managers are enlightened to learn new tools and change the way they manage people? Because doing it, from your desk and watching somebody work, or at least thinking that they're working when they're sitting at their desk, versus focusing on results and communicating and staying in touch, that's the manager's job to do it better. Noah, you said it better before. I think we were online. A lot of people, managers aren't managers.
So that's a horrible loop, though, because if you're expecting managers to integrate solutions and most of your managers are perhaps inequipped to manage effectively, that's a much deeper dive into organizational health, I think. But maybe that's where you have to start. Maybe you have to look at your managers and identify who can connect with certainly the younger generational workforce.
A few people have mentioned tools, and obviously talked a little bit about some of the folks here, but Nick, what advice do you have to our listeners about tools and how to manage new work models? And obviously feel free to talk about Kettle, but and maybe each panelist who has a tool can maybe offer a thought on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think whether you work with one of the groups on this call or not, having the right tools in place is going to be a critical part and critical path to success of kind of stabilizing all of the new work models. I think that one of the key things, and this group has pointed this out consistently, is about getting feedback, whether it's qualitative feedback, like we're getting through some of the work Tony and Brian are doing, or more engagement, peer-to-peer stuff through Ripple, or whether it's quantitative feedback of who's coming in the office and what are people doing, and sort of voting with their time, synthesizing all of that data to be able to right size these flexible models going forward, I think is one of the things that a lot of folks are going to overlook, simply because the value of that data isn't obvious today, because what's right in front of you today is health compliance, scheduling, communications, and sort of the blocking and tackling. But as we go up kind of Maslow's pyramid of needs of hybrid work or flexible work, those are kind of at the base, and then towards the top becomes, to borrow from the analogy, the enlightenment, or work lifestyle balance, and some of the more altruistic things that drive retention and happier employees and engagement. So getting that data early and committing to a tooling system that can help uncover the insights, operationalize V1, V2, and gather the right information, so you have it over the next few years and can really start to measure how this stuff is working, I think is one of the most important aspects of all of it.
Christine, you want to add anything on that point?
I agree with everything Nick just said and everything the other panelists are saying. I mean, from a tool perspective, there's some questions coming in about chat. How do we communicate? How do we create team environments? There are a ton of tools from Ripple, from employee engagement surveys that we perform with our clients. There are a lot of tools out there that you can integrate into your organization to help with the communication, to help with the team building. And it goes right back to, that engagement, that empathy, that communication that we're all discussing, which is so important here today. And then having a safe space for your employees and managers to go and talk things through, I think is really important. Where if managers are struggling with their leadership, right, having somebody that they can work with on a one-on-one. I love what Tony said, right? A lot of this is about managers and mid-level management, right? It's your biggest asset and your biggest liability as an employer. And making sure that your mid-level managers have the support they need to transition into this new environment, to figure out what their team needs, to figure out what their peers need to make this work and happen. And again, not everybody's going to have all of the answers, but your middle-level managers need more support now than ever before, because they're really being challenged as leaders, not just managers.
And there's also an opportunity. I mean, feedback and engagement isn't because from managers to direct reports. It's also managers to owners, our owners and executive asking their managers for feedback so that they can actually manage their managers and see that there's trends that are negative or positive. We always kind of stress the negative. Maybe you've got a manager that's just killing it, and you can go to that person and say, what are you doing that's so different from everybody else who are the managers? And you learn and you get insight. So I think there's that two-pronged component. All too often it's who's doing the annual reviews? The managers? Okay, well, how'd it go? Well, it went okay. What are you doing throughout the year from an owner or executive perspective to get information from your managers?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I just listened to a recording about the annual review and how useless they are.
They're damaging. They're not even useless. They actually take away from culture.
So,
if I can jump in, Joseph, it's never been true that leaders have all the answers. And it's certainly not true now. Everyone we know that has successfully transitioned into some new form of work has done what Banks Benitez at Uncharted described as a pre-mortem. Really, it's not a flip the switch kind of thing. Really thinking through where is the value added work? What is not value added that we can take out of the workplace? What could go wrong here? What can we do to prevent it from going wrong? And then they do a pilot, and they make sure that their employees know that it's a pilot, and they make adjustments along the way. Typically, both Perpetual Guardian that Tony talked about before and Uncharted, and the 4-day week movement, the pilot is a 3-month pilot. And going in, you know what you're going to measure. You know, how do you measure productivity today? That's important to measure. How do you measure employee satisfaction? How do you measure employee engagement? If you're not measuring those now, how are you going to measure coming out of any pilot? So you need to get your metrics in place as well to know what's working, what's not working.
I think that's a really good point that you bring up, Brian, about before the pandemic, with a lot of mid-sized businesses, there was no true measurement of production or productivity except for meeting deadlines and butts and seats in all reality. So we're having a real big conversation about measuring productivity and what does that really look like and how is somebody productive and what does that mean? Just to highlight on that point. And I think to Noah's point, the yearly review is so damaging. I mean, somebody could do something wrong the day before, and now you're giving them the yearly review and you're biased and you don't remember all of the good things that led up to, right, that one mistake that one employee might have made. And just another, we live in a world of instant gratification today, right? We live in a world of LinkedIn, Instagram, TikToks. What is everybody doing? They're putting something online and they're immediately going to see how many likes and comments they have, right? This is what's fueling the world today, and including employee working relationships. So those surveys that you could do through Ripple, those pulse surveys with employees, that's going to help drive that engagement. That's going to help drive that team building. That's going to help drive the communication within the organization. And again, making sure that the leaders are taking that information and then making change. And we're all human, right? This is a new uncharted territory. We can pilot things, we can test things out. It doesn't have to be indefinite. We're not writing things in stone any longer, right? We have delete buttons for a reason. And if something doesn't work, we can be flexible and move. And I think that's what this is all about, right? It's being flexible and listening to what the feedback is.
So just to close that tool question, it's less about the tool, more about the communication of the data point and how that gets out there. So I want to tie that into a Trip asked a question in the chat. If we could talk about how you communicate with the different stakeholders on a regular basis and do different generations, going back to one of our first questions, prefer different ways of communication. So I'm not sure if someone wants to approach that question, anyone on the panel.
Send out a poll to your people. How do you want to communicate? You want to text? You want to online, via phone? You might have a couple 60-plus-year-old executives that say, I want to get coffee. I mean, I think the easiest way, again, is just get feedback and then act on it. So do not ask the survey to everybody, how do you want to text? And you get 58% by text and 10% by email. And then you like email better, so you just use email for everybody, because then everyone's like, well, why'd you ask? But that's an easy way. Just ask them how they want to communicate.
Yeah, Joseph, I can tell you from what we found is the reality is people want different things. So the ability to communicate across different channels, whether that's calendar, email, text, push, being able to kind of acclimate to the way people want to receive the information and kind of have a centralized hub is pretty useful.
Which might be 3 or 4 different ways with a team of 8. But as a manager, if you don't appreciate that, that's the reality, and you just push your preferred way of communicating down their throats, then they're not going to be happy.
So I have a question from my friend Marty. He wants to know how you develop camaraderie between departments and management when people may be in different environments. And I know, Nick, this is something our platform tries to help facilitate. So maybe you want to take that first and then offer it out to anyone else who has an answer there.
Sure. So, I mean, we're really focused on helping people plan co-located activities as a way to boost camaraderie or engagement. And so we're non-prescriptive in how we do it. Some folks like to do 3 and 2, 4-day work week, in 1 week, out 1 week. But I think what you'll see over time is they'll become a clearly kind of understood set of activities that are better done in person. And Christine brought up like orientation and onboarding. That's obviously one that if we can do it in person for companies that have an office, there's probably a better outcome. And whether that's more programmatic culture, bond building activities, social activities, we're focused on kind of trying to enable those things and remove the friction from planning. But I think that'll be one of the things as hybrid and flexible starts to progress, that'll become clear. We know we don't have to commute in to put our heads down at a desk. Like that's become obvious. I think we've all accepted some version of that. So, but when will we trade our time? And what's the why and what's the payoff of being in the office? And I think the organizations that really take some time to think about those things and put some why behind the time in the office are going to see a lot better retention engagement outcomes than there's those that are kind of more haphazard with it.
Tony, you must have a thought on this.
Well, I think Nick really hits it on the head is when you do have that interpersonal time, make the best of it. It must be qualitative. I work with a caterer here in Manhattan. He's getting a lot of requests for more parties because a lot of companies, they're remote, partially remote, hybrid, but boy, that party, that holiday party, that gathering once a month takes on so much more precedence now because that brings that family back into an office that some people may miss, and it is vital. And I think got to make the best use of that face time and make it qualitative so people don't feel it's wasted and they connect.
Excellent. So we're running out of
I
time
have
here.
one new
Oh.
thing, Joseph, right before. I mean, something that, we're seeing a lot of is what we call lattice shadowing within organizations, right? Where you're not necessarily necessarily shadowing or looking at job descriptions of the next position within the organization. There's, we're starting to implement a lot of cross training and intersectional conversations, right? So even though, maybe you're on team A and team B, you're on the same level on the org chart, it's important to start to understand each different division. So something that, lattice one-on-ones is just one of the things that we're seeing to help start to create and build that culture and that teamwork with each other, even though you might not necessarily be in the same department and you might not necessarily want that as your next career move.
Excellent. So we're running a little short on time. I'm going to ask one more question. Noah, this one definitely up your alley from one of our attendees.
Sure.
And then I want to give each one of you folks a minute or two to parting thought, and then I'll wrap up the event with next steps and some housekeeping. So Noah, the question is, how do you measure success when success is on a gradient rather on a gradient on a scale rather than a point?
Wow. How do you measure success when, what's the question again?
How do you measure success when success is a gradient on a scale rather than a point on a graph? So I guess, it's like,
Depending on the
this is
scale you
gray
use or the graph you use, I would suggest that you can measure success either way. I mean, I think there's been a lot of talk over the years about who is I'm assuming they're talking about an individual employee success or organizational success.
They weren't specific, but I would say individual.
Yeah, so you can have a salesperson that sells 2 million widgets, and he's a tremendously profitable person, but he's a horrible co-employee. And 3 people quit because of this person last year because they can't deal with it. Meanwhile, you have somebody who's selling 1.2 million widgets. So granted, not 800,000, it's 800,000 widgets less, but that person trains people. He or she's approachable. It's an open door policy. No stupid questions, just come on in. That person, in my opinion, is more of a successful employee and definitely more of an asset to the person that might give you individual short-term gains.
Excellent. Great answer. So similar to the way we started, if each of you want to take a minute to, share a parting thought and, an idea that you think is, should be the last thing people hear, I'd appreciate it. So Christine, let's start with you again.
Yeah, no, thank you to all the panelists. This was an interesting conversation for sure. We are going to, continue these conversations into January. And I would just say, if your organization is stressed from an HR perspective, PuzzleHR is definitely here to help. We can help create some of these ideas, some of these metrics, some of these, change processes within the organization. And again, as we move through this as leaders in the organization, just remember empathy is going to be your best friend during these times and the engagement. And there's businesses can still move forward, be successful and be productive. It's just going to be a change and be flexible, right? And be flexible on yourself too. And know that this is a moving environment and a moving target for everyone. as business owners and employees. So again, if you're stressed from an administrative perspective, any of the things that we talked about, we most certainly can have a conversation and see how we can help implement some of these things within your organization. And I'm so excited about January. I think it's going to be an interesting series as we dissect all of these segments and dive a little bit deeper into each of these areas.
Thank you, Christine. Tony.
Just to parlay right from that, anytime you try to bring change into your organization, you're going to be challenged and you can't give up too easily. And the key is you can't do it alone. You have to ask your employees. And I know a lot of people pay a lot of lip service to asking your employees, but what do you do with the answers? And Brian spoke a little bit about trust earlier, and we call, if your employees don't have that safe space to give you honest answers, you're going to lose out. So my last parting quote, and this is a little harsh, but I like to share this with business owners. When you ask a question, shut up and listen.
Brian. You're on mute.
You're muted, Brian.
My counsel really parallels what Christine and Tony are saying. As business owners, as business leaders, it's no longer our responsibility to dictate the terms of employment. It's our responsibility to understand the needs and desires of our employees and figure out how that helps move the business forward.
Nice. Noah.
Just again, thank you, Joseph, for moderating. Thank the panelists for participating today and all the attendees. I just want to play off of something Christine said about empathy. I always wonder if tomorrow you would wake up and everything's back to normal. Are we still going to say managers should be empathetic and owners should be empathetic? I think if these tools, so whatever tomorrow brings, you have to be ready to use these tools, use these philosophies of leadership on any scale. Ripple helps gather feedback and drive engagement. Disengagement costs US companies $350 billion a year. So if anybody's listening, they want to know the ROI, drive engagement. It's as easy as that. We gather feedback through short 5-question surveys. We give the dashboard to the user, the managers, they can see how they're doing. And then when you have that compensation discussion every year, it's not a shock to the person being having the communication with.
And Nick, final words.
I think empathy is a great theme. This is a complex set of problems. Nobody's going to get this right out of the gate. The key is to just own that and lean into the fact that it's going to be test and learn, getting the right feedback. I'm happy to be a resource to anybody if I can be helpful. Share lessons learned. The main thing that I can tell you that we've learned is in terms of a tooling standpoint, this is about a lot more than hot desking and hoteling. Like that was appropriate for COVID because that's what we were optimizing for. But if you've kind of seen the theme from this group, it's about people, it's about purpose, it's about connecting and engagement. And from a tooling standpoint, really feel like that's where the future is in terms of managing hybrid work models.
Thank you, Nick. Thank everyone for attending. It's definitely been a lot of topics covered with a lot of meat on the bone, which we'll get into in our January events. I want to thank the panel for their time and preparing and joining us today. Stay tuned. We will send an email out with a link to the recording, everyone's contact information, and the future events in January where we'll go deeper into these topics. Feel free to reach out to us if you have questions between now and then. Wish everyone great holiday season and stay safe. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Everybody.
Thank you.